Please note, we would like to make it very clear, we are totally against the form of discipline described in the articles and accounts being used on minors and non-consenting adults. Although some of these accounts are fictional, and others may be an exaggerated reality, none of them are too far from the truth of what really happened back in those days.
A school paddling. The paddling of two City View High School students is raising questions about the practice of corporal punishment in schools. The mother of one of the students is furious over the reason her daughter was spanked and is concerned over who doled out the punishment. Charlotte Beaver said her 17-year-old daughter was spanked by City View assistant Principal Darrell Frazier for using the bathroom after lunch. School officials disagreed. City View Principal Raymond Weathersby said the school started a new policy around 3 or 4 weeks ago. Because of tardiness issues, students are no longer allowed to use the bathroom after lunch period is over. Weathersby said they have 30 minutes to take care of everything they need to. But, Beaver said her daughter was sick last Thursday and needed to use the bathroom. This is where school officials and Beaver begin to disagree. According to Beaver, her daughter and another female student went to use the bathroom before the period was over. The bell rang while they were waiting in line. Beaver said her daughter used the restroom but made it to class on time and was punished simply for violating the new policy. Weathersby said a teacher told him she approached the girls before they went into the restroom and told them to go directly to class. The teacher said the girls disobeyed and used the bathroom anyway. That, said Weathersby, is why the girls were punished. Beaver said she was outraged when her daughter told her about the incident. This wasn't warranted, she said. I'm not gonna sit by and say it was. If your child needs to go to the bathroom, she needs to go. Beaver also said she has an issue with an adult male administrator spanking a teenage girl. I don't mind the corporal punishment if she's acting a fool, she said. But, I don't think the men ought to be whipping the girls. Weathersby said he doesn't have a problem with the policy or the practice of male administrators punishing female students. And, he said, any policy changes would have to come from the superintendent. City View Superintendent Steve Harris said he stands behind the policy and he sees no reason to change it. Beaver said she won't take her kids out of City View over the incident. But, she would like to see a policy change and feels her daughter is owed an apology. Tim Barnoski, News Channel 6. Any principal, assistant principal, or teacher may use corporal punishment in a reasonable manner against any student for good cause in order to maintain discipline and order within the public schools in accordance with the following guidelines. Corporal punishment shall be administered only after other less stringent measures have failed, or if the conduct of a student is of such nature that corporal punishment is the only reasonable form of punishment under the circumstances. The instrument to be used in administering corporal punishment shall be approved by the principal. Corporal punishment shall be reasonable. Corporal punishment shall be administered in the presence of another professional employee. The nature of the punishment will be such that it is in proportion to the gravity of the offense, the apparent motive and disposition of the offender, and the influence of the offender's example and conduct on others. A disciplinary record shall be maintained and shall contain the name of the student, the type of misconduct, the type of corporal punishment administered, the name of the person administering the punishment, the name of the witness present and the date and time of punishment. Disciplinary records shall be filed in the school office and made available to parents or students, whichever is appropriate. Principal Sean Mays and his cohorts continue their culture of violence against 16 to 18-year-old sexually developed males and females at Webb City High School, Missouri. The school district's policies mandate making a contract of violence with post-pubescent teenage school students, approved by parents, in that 3 hours of detention be exchanged for a beating 3 times with a wooden paddle that is most likely purchased off of a spank porn website on the internet. This school district is introducing the corporal punishment rituals of Sandem to minors, and this type of interaction an adult has with the buttocks of sexually maturing young people is demeaning, degrading, and sexual assault. This violence has been commonplace here, where hundreds of young people have been beaten by Mr. Mays and his companions, who get paid to beat people like paid prostitutes. Holes in a paddle are completely unnecessary. welts, and bruises are almost always due to holes. Not needed, and there had to have been some masochistic leaning to a person who chose to get one for use. My school did not have holy paddles but friends who went places that did speak of them with reverence. 2 to 3 wrist swing swats with a paddle having no holes is plenty, and I speak from first-hand experience. Never understood why more licks or an aerodynamic paddle was necessary. And they weren't. My understanding, not based only on what I've read here, is that while they might theoretically enable paddles to be swung a bit faster, holes were an innovation introduced during slave days and not based on aerodynamics. The intention was to make punishments as agonizing as possible but to avoid marking the slave long-term and thus reducing his or her retail value. Slaves with visible long-term scarring from punishment, as sometimes happened with whipping, were assumed to be troublemakers by potential buyers and thus went unsold or fetched lower prices. Paddling the slave gave a painful punishment, and the markings didn't normally last very long or become permanent. However, it wasn't deemed quite painful enough. Cutting holes in the paddle and paddling on the bare buttocks was the solution adopted. As the paddle struck the bare flesh, it was compressed into the holes. Then as the paddle was raised, it was drawn out and stretched through friction against the sides of the hole. This was not only painful in itself but produced blisters which prolonged the pain of the punishment well beyond the residual pain from paddles without holes, but did eventually heal. School paddlings are normally over clothes. Even if the holes in the paddle were big enough, and generally they don't appear to be, unless any clothing was very thin and fairly tight, one would expect any additional compression and stretching of flesh due to the holes to be very small if it occurred at all. Any friction relative to the sides of the holes would be greatly mitigated by slippage between the layers of normal school clothing. Is it your understanding, please, that holes do, or rather did, as they seem to be outlawed now, actually cause specific damage in school paddlings, or are the problems you mentioned thought to be due to increased aerodynamic efficiency and hence paddle speed? My point was that holes are not necessary. My school had eliminated them a few years before I got there, but neighboring districts still allowed them. And this is where the stories of welts and bruises came from post-school CP. Most of the teachers, admins, THST I knew, who paddled, were parents, aunts of my friends and all adults I knew from church. These were not bad people. I seriously doubt any derived any sort of excitement from it. In their time, it was expected of them to maintain discipline by both their bosses and the parents. I got spanked by a person fitting above description, and I harbor no ill will toward her for the paddling itself. That said, even during that time, some teachers procured and used a paddle with holes. Even then, that was intentionally designed to hurt, not correct, and should never have been allowed.